Good afternoon, good morning. Well, welcome to We Are Virtual Presents You and Your Mental Wealth. And this is a masterclass in self-care and building resilience. I'm really honored to be able to do this for you today. And I hope wherever you are listening, in the home environment right now, that you are safe and that you are well, most importantly. So my name is Ruth Cooper-Dickson. I am a positive psychology practitioner, I'm a coach, and I'm also the managing director of SHAMPS, the Global Mental Wealth People Consultancy. So I'm going to take you through over the next maybe 40 minutes or so, just to go through ways in which we can build our self-care and build our resilience. And as you know, this was due to happen later on in May. And we've brought this forward as part of the We Are Virtual series. And I'm going to kind of talk a lot really about where we're at right now, because I think that's really important to recognize and acknowledge the current situation that we're all facing. And these are really key concepts that we need to be thinking about and be mindful of as we are moving forwards. So here we go. Here's the first slide, just an intro slide as before, but I just would like to perhaps give a bit of an indicator as well around thinking about building that self-care and building resilience and what it means around our mental wealth. And SHAMPS uses the term mental wealth because we think it's important to look not only at mental health, because people often take that from a negative perspective. They think about illness, and often people might not associate mental health with themselves if they think of illness, so therefore almost self-stigmatizing. We take the concepts of mental health and wellness or well-being and fuse them together, because we also think it's important to recognize we have to invest in our own well-being. We have to take that time and take that effort. Unfortunately, as we've all grown adults, we know that these things don't come easily, and in fact the good things we should do for ourselves, you know, the eating right, the exercising, the being mindful, and the other activities I'm going to walk through with you today, you know, they have to take time, they have to take practice. And in the current climate we're in, we could all do with perhaps reviewing that toolbox and also reviewing where we're at right now. So maybe for you, it is an opportunity to think about, where am I right now? What does this look and feel like? This is a space, it's 40 minutes for you to take some quiet time, to plug yourself in and to reflect upon how you feel today. And I think we can all acknowledge at the moment that our emotions and our feelings are changing quite rapidly. In some cases, not even by the week, but by the day, sometimes several times in the day. I know that I found that myself. And as somebody who spent 5 years in recovery, I've learned to build those resources and tools, and finding them at a time of what is essentially trauma, because we're all going through this difficult experience together, is being able to pull on those resources. What's important about positive psychology, and I said that I'm a positive psychology practitioner, is that we don't see things as happy and joyous and wonderful all of the time. We don't go around with rose-tinted glasses on. But what we do is that we see things from both the light and the dark. And currently, we are in lots of darkness. We're in a world which is very fearful, which is very challenging, which is very difficult. It's hugely anxiety-inducing. And triggering for all of us in so many different ways. And the ability of having those dark experiences, of having the darkness in our lives, means we do get to feel grateful and we do get to feel appreciative of the light that we feel, and the positives that we can look for. And again, so this doesn't mean about being overly happy and excited all of the time, but what it does mean is acknowledging that we have all a range of emotions within us. And I don't really like to think about emotions as just positive and negative, because they're just emotions. And I think, there's times when we don't need to be happy all the time, the same as we don't want to be sad or angry or irritable all the time, but there's a justification as to why we feel those. And as I was saying actually before I jumped on the call, it's more powerful and it's much more healthier to acknowledge all of our emotions and not necessarily lock them away if we think they might be considered bad, or that it's that ability to be able to open them up, which I'm going to talk about with self-care and self-reflection. And by acknowledging them, not only does it help us feel better mentally to call out an emotion for how we're feeling, but also physically it helps us. Because if you think of a pressure cooker, if we start to keep all those emotions locked away, that we feel anxious or we feel fearful or we feel sad or angry or irritable, all these different emotions you might be feeling right now, is to be able to build those down like a pressure cooker, and before we know it, the lid does come off. So being able to call things out for how we see them is really important. Being brave enough and courageous enough to acknowledge those, because none of us are perfect. Perfectionism is a form of anxiety, I like to think. We're all flawed. We all have light and dark in us. So just being able to step back and go, you know what, that's how I'm feeling today. So for you just to have that moment and to embrace how you feel right now on this Tuesday at 12:06, to think about, right, how am I feeling today? And this is really important when we start to look at building self-care and to think about resilience, because we have to acknowledge everything that's happening both internally and also externally. As we go through the slides, if you do have any questions, you can pop them into the Q&A, and we will answer those at the end. I'll leave sort of 5-10 minutes at the end for any questions that you might have that you would like to ask. So I hope that is okay with yourself. So investing in our mental wealth requires 3 factors. It requires it to be simple. It requires simplicity. I don't know about you, but I found it actually, in some cases, quite overwhelming with some of the amount of online content that's out there, because it's like, should I be doing this in the morning and yoga, and should I be doing this workout, and I should be reading this book, and I should be writing my next book, and I could be doing all these different things. And actually what mental wealth requires is small adjustments, small incremental micro nudges, I call them, just to be able to build and invest on that practice. It's like when the new year comes around, and we all say, that was a broad assumption there, but we join the gym because we want to get fit, and it's a New Year's resolutions, and we go full pelt, and they don't last much longer than a couple of months, because we're just trying to do too much too soon. So now is actually a perfect time just to build in some small micro nudges into your day, some small micro steps into kind of building your mental wealth, and keep it really simple, and take one area of your mental wealth and address that. Don't try and do all of these things at once and become this all perfect person. We also have to acknowledge we are in a very difficult, challenging time. So that is going to shift again, as we've talked about already, how in your day. So be simple with what you're going to do. Develop patience. That's a tough one for lots of us, I am sure. I know it is for me. I want everything now. I want to feel, a million times better, but sometimes these things do take time. It takes patience. We don't get it right all the time. And there's a reason why practices like yoga and mindfulness and meditation are called practice, because we don't get really good at it, really, probably ever. It's a practice. We keep evolving, we keep developing. So investing in mental wealth requires patience, and it's also about not, being not always specifically attaching goals to certain things. I think that's really important to recognize that goals can be really important, but they, just be kind with ourselves, and that kind of links into the building compassion. Being kind to ourselves if we don't hit things we expect to. Building compassion if we said we were going to get up every morning this week whilst the kids are in bed or whilst the partner's asleep, and while we're all trying to work from home and do some yoga in the morning, or I'm going to spend some time reading my work documents. And the best will in the world, sometimes these things don't happen, and then I'm live on Sunday with a really good friend of mine, but she's a best-selling author on anxiety, and she's just bringing out a new book on panic attacks. And we were talking about, she was saying that when she doesn't hit her to-do list in the day, or when she doesn't do all the things that she'd set out to at the start of the week, she really berates herself for that, and she could be really negative self-talk. And I think in lots of our lives we don't build enough compassion, and we really have to start with ourselves when we're talking about being compassionate, so we are able to give it to others. So think about, when you're looking at your mental wealth, you need that simplicity. We need to develop that patience and take that time and build compassion. And if there's one thing that this current situation has taught me, is just to be able to have that pause. And I've really struggled with the last, not so much this week, but last week and the week before, as somebody who's usually 500 miles an hour racing around, not only physically being contained, but a little bit of that mental containment. Learning to adjust to that has been something, and having patience with the world around me as well is really has been a real learning curve. So these things are kind of methods and thought processes to really adopt in the current climate. Now, in terms of barriers to self-reflection, this is actually taken from a book by Christopher Johns, and he set up this book for, it's actually for healthcare professionals, nurses actually, on reflective practice. And it's something, as a positive psychology practitioner and a coach and psychologist, and somebody who is a mental health first aider, that I've really had to learn to adopt and to deal with. And many of you might be sat there thinking, well, I don't really know how to self-reflect. What does this actually mean when it comes to building self-care and resilience? And there's a few points here that might be pertinent to you and you might recognize in yourself. So you might feel uncomfortable channeling, easy for me to say, challenging and evaluating your own thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Again, it's something we often don't feel comfortable doing. You may feel confused as to where to start, and I think that comes in from the overwhelming feeling currently of, there's a lot of information out there. We can go away and develop ourselves. This is a perfect time to do that, but where do I start? You might feel it's too time consuming. So, I haven't got time to sit and journal, or to sit and think and let my own thoughts be. You might fear judging or critiquing yourself. As I said right at the start, we all have light and dark in us. None of us are perfect. As humans, we're fallible, we're all flawed. Again, this goes back to the compassion. It's about judging yourself in a way that is non-judgmental. It's more of an observation, and it's not being critiquing yourself in that negative self-talk way. So it is giving some compassion. And I often say to people, how do you talk to yourself? Is it how you talk to your best friend? Is it how you talk to your boss or a colleague or your partner? So being mindful of how you kind of critique and judge yourself. some people, and this is very true, believe me, having worked in the space now for some time, is that people can sort of say, well, there's nothing wrong with me. Everything's great. Everything's fine. And potentially that could be the case, but self-reflection, we all need and should have an ability to self-reflect on our own behaviors and our own thoughts and feelings. And it isn't about anything being wrong with you. It's just actually about acknowledging how we're dealing with the situations that are around us. And again, this might be a completely new topic for you. This might be the first time that you have ever thought about self-reflection and self-care and resilience. So it could be a completely new state for you to start with. So again, going back to that patience, don't beat yourself up when you think about don't beat yourself up when you're kind of struggling to find your way, or you're not sure where to start. Just take your own time, because everybody's on, without sounding too cliche, but it's totally true, we're all on our own journey, and self-awareness is something that we take at different places and points in our life. And as I said, now is a real time we can do that. So let's just move on. So what is resilience? And I've just come off actually a client workshop, and I asked this question, and they came out with, I've got them actually here, and if you have a moment actually just to think for you, what does resilience mean to you? So have a little think about that. And this might be something you want to ask a question on towards the end, but some people see it as bouncing back, they said, strength, digging deep, calm, thinking through, coping, dealing with the situation. So resilience is actually, well, there's lots of different concepts there. When I give those few phrases, there's lots of different ways that people perceive resilience. And this is really important to recognize, because people often use the word resilience quite throwaway. So, oh, they're really resilient, they've got a resilient personality. Well, this is actually an area that I've specialized in terms of my own research, resilience and post-traumatic growth. And it's an area I'm moving into with my doctorate. And it's really, I'm fascinated by how people deal with adverse situations and how resilient people can be, especially under times of significant stress or trauma, as we're currently experiencing right now. So it's really, really timely to think about this stuff. So there's no such thing as a resilient personality per se. Nobody has a resilient personality. It's not a personality trait, if you like. We all have the ability to build resilience. We also have an ability to be resilient at certain points in our life, but just because we might have been in one situation doesn't necessarily mean we will be in the future. And there's over 122 definitions of the word resilience in academia. So you can see that people have a different perspective of what being resilient means to them. I think it's really pertinent to recognize right now that you're not going to expect to be over positive or happy all of the time. And there is that, that adversity around digging deep, and I'm going to look at this with the three aspects of resilience. But not everyone's going to be over positive or happy every single day, and that is totally normal. And I just want to bring in these two other concepts as well: acceptance commitment therapy. So our attitude matters. There's a lot we can't change right now in the current situation. We can't change the fact we have a daily allowance to leave the home. We can't change the fact that we have a new process to be able to go to the supermarket, and then the goods and the basic things we might need may or may not be available, or a limited quantities. We might be worrying about loved ones and people we care about, but there's also an element of there's things that are out of our control. And that is really important to recognize, because when we spend that time worrying and feeling anxious and creating a stress response to those situations, actually it's not helpful to us physically as well as mentally. It's not also helpful to those people who are around us. So again, it's thinking about that attitude towards those, and acknowledge, again, going back to that acknowledgement, acknowledging that those situations are there, they're very real, and it's totally okay to feel those. But actually, what can we do about it instead, or what is in our control? It is really important to think about, because we can't control certain situations, and so that attitude is really, really important. Behavioural activation as well is something that's really linked into resilience. This is a cognitive behavioural therapy tool to build that engagement, and I've really noticed it in myself of late. So for example, I'm a marathon runner. I was actually due to run the Manchester Marathon this Sunday, and they postponed it just as I finished my last long run a few weeks ago of 18 miles. So, you know, I'm a big exerciser. I like to run. I like to get outdoors. And but even myself, you know, there's been times when I've really struggled with, right, I need to get out of the house. I need to go for a walk. And this happened to me on Sunday. And behavioural activation is, first of all, being really self-aware, noticing those feelings. So on Sunday, I was like, it's 4:30, 5 o'clock. I really can't be bothered to use my daily allowance and to go outside of the flat. Okay, so I'm noticing that, and I'm acknowledging then why that is. So I was thinking, well, you know, I've been sat around all day, as in I was working on Sunday. It'd be much easier just to cook some dinner, maybe have a bath, and you know, chill out for the evening. But actually what I did was I took that split-second decision, put my trainers on. I was probably wearing some very random outfit if I think back to what I was wearing, and actually just went for a walk around the block. And because I put a podcast in, I found that much easier. Ended up walking for 30 minutes and came home. And I noticed the difference in my mood. I did notice the shift towards those positive emotions. And I think that behavioural activation, Mel Robbins is, you know, as an author, is quite famous around the 5-second rule. And that is actually behavioural activation. It's actually noticing how you feel, acknowledging it, and then just going, right, split-second decision. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, and put my trainers on and I'm going. And just going to get outside and get some fresh air. So that engagement piece, the more we stop and we overanalyze it, that is where we start to see those cognitive distortions, which is where our brain starts to tell ourselves you know, a perception of reality which isn't true. So, you know, that engagement is really important at the moment as well. So your engagement and your attitude, plus thinking about how your emotions feel across a continuum, is really key in looking at that resilience. And the thing is with resilience is we have to go through an experience to create resilience. You know, we can equip ourselves with different tools, but we have to be in a situation to build resilience, and that is exactly where we are right now. We're in this really unique, unprecedented situation where we're all able to build these skills of resilience and tools of resilience for the future. Okay, and hopefully we will never go through anything like this ever again. But if we start to build these tools now, then any other stressful life events or traumatic situations that we might come across in our everyday lives, we can use what we're learning. And resilience tends to come in 3 different phases. And I used some of these before, which was from the client I was with this morning, who, when they were talking about resilience, when I asked that question, they kind of shared their comments. And I like to think of these as trees, if you like, different types of trees. So recovery, I think of as the palm tree, and that's bouncing back, and that's often a common way that we think about resilience. You know, we bounce back, so something hits us, knocks us down, but we're back again. And a palm tree, if it's weathered by the storm, it can be battered and it's blown around all over the place, and then the storm goes and it's exactly as it was. Nothing's changed. So a lot of people identify with that resilience attitude in their own self, or they can witness it in others, their loved ones, work colleagues, etc. Resistance is standing strong in the face of adversity, quite stoic, digging deep, that strength. I think that's the oak tree, because an oak tree is, you know, has very strong roots. It's there for years, hundreds of years even, and it doesn't move. You know, it is what it is, and it's very solid. And lots of people are like that. You know, they dig deep, they continue as they were, and that for them is how resilience feels. So that might feel, you might identify with that. And the other part of resilience is reconfiguration. And you can think of this as Nietzsche's adage, or paraphrased adage, of what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And in a tree, you could think of that as blossom, as some new flowers that happen to grow on a tree that had never happened before, some leaves or some new branches. And it's the change, it's the growth. And I think when we start to look at the current situation, as we start to move through this, I think there'll be quite a few of us actually have changed as a result of what we're experiencing right now. And it doesn't mean that we wish, that we're glad that we've gone through this, but actually some of us might, you know, post you know, this pandemic we're experiencing, might shift and change to, you know, we might have a greater appreciation for life, or our values towards life will have shifted, or the connections with those we love are significantly different, more positive, because we've kind of had that post-traumatic growth. And that is also really important to think about, as well as we move through the next, you know, whether that's a couple of months or however long we're going to be in this situation. So they're really important areas of resilience, and kind of building resilience for you to think about, and hopefully they resonate with you. But the importance is that not one way is right or wrong. They're just different ways of dealing with situations, and we all have an ability to kind of work with those very differently. So think about how you see resilience, and if you're working remotely right now and you're working with colleagues, think about what their attitude might be, slightly different to yours, so they might respond in situations very different to you. And I think that's something we can all be a little bit mindful of while we're working remotely as well. Self-care, before this, I think we all, BC, before Corona, we all thought of self-care, or many people thought of self-care as, you know, we think of it as bubble baths or face masks, but actually self-care is essential, and it's not a luxury. And at the moment, you know, we're all experiencing a heightened baseline, if you like, of pressure and anxiety. Even those of us who perhaps have never experienced mental ill health, or have generally always been quite positive, optimistic individuals, I think we can all fairly say that the environment we're in right now is creating a heightened sense of anxiety and stress for all of us. And with our adrenal glands, what happens is when stress or anxiety comes into our bodies, and you know, it doesn't differentiate between stress and anxiety, is that it releases that adrenaline and that cortisol that floods the body. And if we're not careful with that, with those changes, so our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, and glucose is released to kind of do that fight or flight response. We also have all the blood rushing away from our digestive organs to our arms and legs. So we're thinking lots more about, you know, those aches and pains that come, the fatigue, the exhaustion that comes from filling ourselves with adrenaline, cortisol. And also, if we're not careful, we tend to, you know, I've spoken already about cognitive distortions, that perception that of reality which isn't quite true, whether that's things like magnifying a situation, so making it to be out much more worse than what it actually is, or all or nothing approach. So if nothing is, it's either got to be 110% perfect, or it's no good. Fortune telling, you know, prophesizing, I can't even say that word. Yeah, in terms of, you know, situations kind of creating what we think people are thinking about us. We're losing a lot of that non-verbal cues at the moment, unless we're video calling colleagues and family and friends even. So we could be telling ourselves these untruths which actually aren't actually true at all. We're at real risk of increasing that anxiety as a baseline for all of us. So, more risk of people experiencing panic attacks, and we don't have to have a anxiety disorder or panic disorder to experience a panic attack. 1 in 4 of us experience a panic attack at any point in our life. And if you think about the current situation, which is really increasing that pressure on us, we could potentially be a bit more risk of that. And we see things like breathlessness and a whole bunch of other kind of ways that we deplete our own energy into the negative. So we have to think about what are the basics, what is really important for us to focus on. Giving space for mindfulness, and this doesn't have to be cross-legged, sat facing a wall or Zen. It can just be a couple of minutes of breathing, getting yourself some headspace. I wrote an article, it was interviewed for an article with the Metro earlier on last week on isolating with a partner and family, which I don't have that problem, but if you have those people who you love and care around you all of the time at the moment, finding that little bit of space can be quite difficult. Just saying, actually, I just need my own time for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, having an appreciation for the good things as well, and being more mindful about what we're drinking, what we're eating, fueling our bodies in a way. At the moment, having a strong sense of immunity is really important with the virus. So looking after ourselves, making sure we hydrate. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely somebody who I can sit at a desk and then think, oh my goodness, I've not had enough water today. A 5% drop of hydration is a 20% drop in performance. It's what athletes use a lot, that rule. So, keeping yourself hydrated, drinking lots of water helps flush out the body physically, but also keeps us mentally alert. Rest, I think, is one that all of us have been struggling with in some shape or form. Potentially is around, the clocks have changed as well, which hopefully that helps people in the mornings to try and wake up a bit fresher, not have dark mornings, and lighter evenings to kind of stretch out that day, to use that exercise allowance and perhaps go out in the evenings as well as throughout the day. But whilst we're contained in this situation of working from home and all activities taken at home and living at home, it's thinking about that rest. So being able to stop those blurred boundaries of being able to put away work and to be able to focus on having an evening routine, being able to relax and kind of get ourselves ready for sleep, because sleep is where all the repair happens in our body. It's where we process the day's events. It enables us to regenerate ourselves in our brain as well as in our body. And I read a study recently that was done, that 30 minutes of reading lowered people's blood pressure, it lowered heart rate, and it also reduced psychological distress. So even switching off in the evening, having that bit of extra time now where you're not having to go to bed perhaps as early as what you did because you're not commuting in the morning maybe into the city. It's just having a bit of time to read a good book, reading something that's funny or positive, or a book, a genre that you really enjoy, to be able to switch off, calm that system down, ready for the evening. And finally, movement is one as well that's really important. And again, this doesn't mean you have to be doing every online class that's going at the moment, although the fitness industry has responded fantastically to the current situation. There's so many things you can try. If you hadn't thought about doing it before, now is your opportunity to get in there. But just moving your body, if you're sat at a desk all day, don't get up, move, set your alarm to go off if you're not getting up and down for children and pets. But being able to stretch your body, taking up that daily allowance, I think that is really important, maybe because we can all be in danger of not getting outside or getting into the garden, if you have a garden, get some fresh air, and whilst the sun is shining, getting that vitamin D as well is really important. So these are all essential. These are essential ways to look after ourselves. They're not luxury. These are, ways that we can all improve our mental wealth and build in that self-care. We use CLEAN at Shamps, and this stands for connect, learn, exercise, acts of kindness, and notice. And these are taken from the 5 Ways of Wellbeing from the New Economics Foundation. And we like this way of thinking about it because it's kind of keeping clean and investing in your mental wealth. But there's all of these you can kind of do alone, or you can do them with other people in terms of your colleagues. So we've used this a lot to talk with remote teams about building not just the usual team chats and the one-to-ones, but also fun ways they can connect with each other. So we've had organizations that have created, online fun ways to chat about, their cats or the books that they're reading, book club. Now's a real time when we're thinking about building that self-care and resilience is learning, taking up some opportunity to self-develop. If there was a good time to do it, now would be it. Using that exercise to boost the brain's health. This isn't just about our own cognitive behaviors, but also just thinking about, the brain's fitness itself. And exercise is proven as well to reduce and alleviate symptoms of mild anxiety and depression. But just moving your body, exercising, and whether that's doing a bit of, I've seen lots of people have been doing a lot of gardening recently, and I think that's a great way as well, bringing in the notice of being in nature. Acts of kindness can be for yourself. So that self-care that I spoke about, and I don't know about you, but I've really had to put some boundaries around how I've been communicated with as well. Like, there's been this quite intense pressure. Everyone's wanting to chat online and video call, and actually last week I just said to my family, can I just, if I don't contact you for a few days, it's because I'm really busy with work, but I will check in and I'll be around at the weekend. So creating some boundaries is really healthy. Saying no as well as saying yes, that's an act of kindness to yourself. Taking that 10 minutes for you in the morning or in the evening, 15 minutes is important. It's an act of kindness. But also doing things for other people. It boosts our own mental wealth. There are studies that show that, and also we're doing things for other people. I think now is a real time when the communities are really coming together. People are looking out for each other. So that's something that is important. And notice what's happening around us. So taking some headspace, being more mindful of what we're doing, whether that's a daily activity like washing the dishes, whether we're using a meditation app, whether we're just getting out there in the fresh air and going for a run and taking a photo. That's one of the things me and my team are doing, as well as me and my family. So if we're out and about on our daily allowance, if we see a nice, something that makes us smile, a nice tree or a piece of art on a wall or whatever it might be, even with my family, it's like the loved ones, the children who might be out, with my sisters out on their bikes. Just sharing those photos is really a nice way to kind of be really mindful about a moment, but also to build those connections. So these are really simple ways you can think, right, how am I bringing in mental wealth? What does that self-care look like? And by doing these positive emotions, we really start to build on those positive sides that works with our resilience. This is a formula for authentic living. So this is taken from a professor of who's my mentor for my research, Stephen Joseph, from his book Authentic. But I think it's a really cool way that we can start to think about at the current time, that resilience piece and self-care is his authenticity is like, know yourself, own yourself, be yourself. So think about, now is a really good time to think about all the things you love doing, that you enjoy doing, that are your passions, whether that's your books, your movies, your family, hobbies. Bring those on board. Own yourself. As a coach, I've used this as a homework activity a number of times, is to get people to write their mission statement. Thinking about their mission statement and building that resilience is a really a good way to kind of think, well, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, these are my values. It takes a bit of time. Again, going back to that self-reflection, it's something that we have to build upon, but it's a really good way to focus on who you are, what and once we start to identify ourselves, then we can start to go back to those self-care tools and what works for us and what doesn't. And then be yourself. These are the VIA character strengths. They're taken from positive psychology. There's 24 character strengths under 6 virtues, and they're research from all the religions and philosophical intentions that have been set throughout 3 millennia, and basically they boiled them down to these 6 virtues and 24 strengths. And you might look at these and think about, well, that really resonates with me, being creative really resonates with me, or kindness really resonates with me. But actually, this is a tool you could, if you have a look for the VIA character strengths, that's a good way to, again, get to know yourself a little bit more, think about your strengths, and that helps to boost our resilience as well. We start to identify traits in ourselves that actually we can bring to the forefront, especially at the moment when things are very much, can be quite difficult for all of us. Finally, we've spoke about the authenticity piece. We've looked at clean as a way that you can adopt those 5 ways of well-being, and this is a tool that Shams has created called the Wealth strategy, and it's actually building around our current program at the moment, which is going to be online very shortly, which is Wealth. So it's taken those 5 ways of well-being, but also adding some extra information around those to holistically approach like how we build and invest in self-care to help support our resilience, help support those positive emotions. And we've included things on here like sleep, which is so important. It's one of the fundamentals, but mindfulness can be adapted in everything that we do, whether that's mindful eating, drinking, mindful connecting. It's not just, as I said, about being all zen and listening to an app. So again, think about ways that you are creating some of the basics. I mean, you will probably think, well, this is nothing new. I knew all about these, but these are ways that you can really go back to basics at the moment while you have time to do that, but not beating yourself up. Again, going back to the patience, being kind to yourself, being compassionate, and trying one of these, picking one of these up and going, I'm going to really work on this week, just trying to get a bit more activity, or I'm going to try this week to cook something that's quite healthy for me and my family, or for myself throughout this week. And with these boosts of Wealth, you can start to help your resilience as well. And finally, gratitude attitude. I think we can all look for the small things that are really important to us right now. And gratitude is one of the main positive psychology interventions. It has lots of research into it, evidence-based research into how gratitude really helps our positive emotions. Whether this for you is when you climb into bed at the end of the day and just mentally think of 1 or 2 things that really made you smile, that you're really grateful for that day. And it can be as small as really enjoying your cup of coffee, to a joke you might have shared with one of your children, to a really nice email from a colleague. Like there's different ways you can view this, but I guarantee that once you start to do this, you bring in that element of feeling grateful for what you do have. And I know before we started this call, I was saying, on the workshop, I was saying on the call to Leona and Chantal, I was sort of saying, well, I almost felt a little bit guilty because of some things that I've really enjoyed doing recently, or I'm really proud of. And I think we've got to remember that life does carry on. And if we're looking at resilience, we have to be positive. We have to embrace those positive moments that we can experience, because it's what helps us get through, it's what helps us survive and thrive. So, you know, whether you're doing a gratitude attitude list, you know, in the morning when you journal, if you journal, climbing into bed at night, or at the end of the week, just reflect back on a Friday evening. What 2 or 3 things I'm really grateful for, what went well this week, is a really nice touch. And finally, the last stop is a stop, breathe, be. And I've spoken a lot about being mindful and mindfulness and what this means. This is a tool, an exercise that was given by a doctor at Penn University, which is the founding home of positive psychology. And it's also in the book How to Break Up with Your Phone by Catherine Price. And stop, breathe, be is really simple. And all it is, and you can join me now if you like, you just put your feet flat on the floor. Hands resting in your lap, crown of the head just lifted up, not overly, but just nice kind of neat posture. And you just take a deep breath in through your nose, and you just stop, let it out, and just be. And that literally takes a couple of seconds. And it just slows and calms the whole cardiovascular system down. And you can do that as many times as you like. But it might be one that's really handy as well if you're with loved ones and children at the moment, where you think you really want to respond in a certain way, but actually just stopping, breathing and being gives you that little bit of self-care, and helps you as well as helps them as well. So that brings me to the close. I hope you've enjoyed this workshop online. Here are the contact details for Shamps. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can also sign up to shampsconsult.com, where we have a newsletter that's due to come out as well, which has loads of information on there and helpful, useful links on positive psychology and organizational psychology and mental wealth. I'm open to take any questions.